the coming winter adjournment. We'll go to question time. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Foreign Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, this week the United Kingdom hosted the Ukraine Recovery Conference, which the US Secretary of State Blinken announced a further $1.3 billion to help reconstruct Ukraine's energy grid, transport infrastructure and support Ukraine's economic recovery. Unlike the US, the UK, Japan and other like-minded partners, Australian ministers did not invest the time to attend the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Minister, how much has the Albanese government invested to support humanitarian and reconstruction efforts in Ukraine since coming to office?
Thank you. Senator Fawcett, Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank the senator for his question, and I do thank him or acknowledge his serious interest in and focus on national security and foreign policy. And I think it is, particularly at these times, it is a good thing if we have people from different political parties and across the chamber who actually take a serious interest in these matters. Senator Fawcett has asked a number of questions about this, and I'll make the first point about ministerial representation. And it's pretty disappointing, isn't it, when that is the basis of a question, and where the opposition, on the one hand, Mr Dutton complains about the Prime Minister going to international events, and then you come in here and complain that I've actually turned up in the Senate to answer questions as opposed to going to this event. So, I mean, the opposition really can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand you're doing too much travelling, Prime Minister, demand parliamentary accountability and then have a go at us for actually deciding that we probably should make sure we attend Parliament, as is appropriate in such circumstances where parliamentary duties have prevented Australian ministers from attending. And obviously, as Senator Payne well knows, you can't attend everything. We have asked our High Commissioner, Mr Smith, who is obviously a former Defence and Foreign Affairs Foreign Minister. I also provided a message to the conference. I'm coming to the quantum.
Oh, sorry, Senator Fawcett. I believe the minister's
that is the relevant.
Quantum. Thank you. Please continue, Minister.
Well, there was a comment made at the beginning about representation. I understand that we have provided some total of $680 million to date, including $510 million in military assistance. I know the senator has raised, I think in estimates, the provision of the small amount of money.
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Fawcett, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, you are correct, and I'll repeat that here. Australia is well placed to help Ukraine's recovery, particularly with our world-class expertise in removing landmines and unexploded ordnance. And the UN stats confirm that such devices have killed or injured over 800 people, including 94 children, since Russia's illegal invasion began in February of 2022. Your department has confirmed that there is $12.9 million uncommitted from the Humanitarian Emergency Fund. Will you use this to support demining operations urgently needed in the Ukraine?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I acknowledge the senator did ask these in estimates, and can I also acknowledge he has raised this with me, and I've not had the opportunity in the hours since yesterday afternoon to check on his requests on this front. I will ascertain precisely. I've just asked my office to provide the emergency humanitarian emergency fund a response to that aspect of the question. I would make the point. It is obviously we stand with Ukraine, and we have, for all the reasons we know, against the illegal and immoral invasion by Russia. We continue to provide support. The Senator would know there are many humanitarian emergencies around the world at this stage, sadly, and I think some come to mind. Obviously, Sudan is one of them. So there are many calls on our humanitarian emergency funding, and we will continue to consider all requests.
Senator Fawcett, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, the coalition government, and I acknowledge with the now government's support, established Australia's record as the largest non-NATO contributor to Ukraine, with a comprehensive package announced soon after the invasion. Internationally now, Australia is seen by some reports to now be a bystander in terms of the support. What is the government doing to make sure that that impression does not prevail and that Australia takes its rightful place as a strong supporter of Ukraine?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Australia is a strong supporter of Ukraine. Australia understands, as a member of the international community, that the abrogation of the United Nations Charter and the principle of the protection of territorial sovereignty is not only an important legal principle as a matter of principle, but is also fundamental to our security. And when I speak to those in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific, I explain our view. I articulate our view why Ukraine, even though it's a long way from some of the nations I visit, why it matters. And it matters because the principle of territorial sovereignty, the principle that the UN Charter should be adhered to, is a protection. A protection for countries small and large in the international system. So I disagree with the assertion that the senator is making. Australia stands against—
Thank you, Senator Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I refer to the state of the economy a year ago when the Albanese government inherited a poor economic legacy from the Liberals and Nationals, with reference to economic data which showed that wages were stagnant, $1 trillion of debt with nothing to show for it, and the highest quarterly inflation this century, as well as challenging economic conditions globally. Can the Minister please update the Senate on Australia's economic outlook since the Albanese Labor began growing the economy, supporting businesses and boosting jobs and wages?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Order across the chamber. Minister Wong.
We wanted to remind you one more time.
Senator Watts.
President, thank you very much, and I thank Senator Sheldon for his question. And the Albanese government and those on this side are focused on delivering a better future for all Australians, and we understand at the heart of that is a stronger economy. A stronger economy, and an economy in which all Australians can participate and all Australians can gain the benefit. Now, those opposite, I know they have found the truth hard to bear at times, but the reality is they left the economy in a terrible state. Their approach to economic management was defined by wastes and rorts. And of course, as the good senator has reminded us, $1 trillion in debt. $1 trillion in debt with nothing to show for it. With nothing to show for it. Of course, you know, they did tell us, and they printed cups, cups that told everybody that they were in surplus. But like so much under the Morrison Liberal government, it was just yet another announcement without any delivery. A slightly embarrassing one. They were left with a lot of merchandise they don't know what to do with. Lots of merch. But $1 trillion in debt with nothing to show for it. And what else are they known for? Well, those opposite deliberately kept wages low. Deliberately kept wages low. And those opposite, they might go all they like, but Australians know they were for lower wages. They were for lower wages. And they continue to be. If you just listen to Senator Cash on anything to do with industrial relations, Australian workers understand what she's saying. She wants their wages lower. You want their wages lower, Senator Cash. And Australians know what you're all about. Australians know the ideological bent that you're all about.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Order. Before I call Senator Sheldon, I am going to remind senators that constant calling out, interjections across the chamber are disorderly. I called the chamber to order about 7 times and everyone kept interjecting. Senator Sheldon.
Can the Minister please explain to the Senate how is the Albanese Labor government taking action to help all Australians have access to secure and well-paid jobs? And how is the government's progress evidenced by Australia's labour market data that has been recently released?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, more Australians are in work than ever before. The participation rate is higher, and more women are employed in paid.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator Wong. Senator Wong, please continue.
I know those opposite may not like to hear the fact that we actually have more people in work, more women in work than ever before, and we've seen record jobs growth. That's a good thing for Australians. That's a good thing for Australians.
Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. More than 465,000 jobs have been created since we came to office, and Australia has recorded significantly stronger employment growth than any of the major advanced economies. Since May 2022, jobs here have grown faster than in the US, UK, Japan, Germany and Canada. Now, we know those ahead. We know that the circumstances ahead are challenging. But unlike those opposite, we are focused on stronger jobs growth and better wages growth.
Has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Can the minister explain to the Senate how the government's economic plan is laying the foundations for a stronger economy and delivering a better future for Australians?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, we are a government focused on making sure we have a plan to make our economy stronger and more productive, and working with Australians, helping Australians through challenging times. And our budget was carefully calibrated to take the pressure off the cost of living rather than adding to it. And at the same time, we're laying stronger foundations by making our economy more productive. Now, what we do know is we had a wasted decade under those opposite. What we do know is that those opposite delivered the slowest decade of productivity growth in 60 years, and it will take time to turn this around.
Order.
What we do know is those opposite were not supportive of wage increase for minimum wage workers. What we do know is those opposite believed that lower wages were a deliberate design feature of their economic plan. Australians know what you are about. You are about lower wages for working people and less secure jobs.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. The Australian reported last week that the Commonwealth Government data was stolen by Russian hackers who infiltrated the systems of law firm HWL Ebsworth. Will the government reveal what data has been stolen and when the government knew that Commonwealth data had been compromised?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Patterson. I think it won't surprise Senator Patterson that we're not going to be revealing the data that appears to have been hacked by Russian hackers. I'm actually a little surprised that Senator Patterson would expect that we would do such a thing. But certainly the Australian government is aware of a cyber incident impacting HWL Ebsworth. On the 1st of May 2023, HWL Ebsworth reported a cyber incident involving ransomware and claims of data exfiltration and publication to the dark web. On the 8th of May 2023, HWL Ebsworth provided initial notification to the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner under the Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme. On the 9th of June 2023, HWL Ebsworth became aware that a threat actor had claimed to have published at least 1.4 terabytes of exfiltrated data on the dark web. The government continues to actively engage HWL Ebsworth as it investigates the extent of the breach, including impacts on Commonwealth information. HWL Ebsworth has begun notifying impacted clients regarding their information identified as compromised as part of this breach. This process remains ongoing and will take time to complete due to the scale of the impacted data. The government is continuing to work with HWL Ebsworth to understand and manage potential consequences of the publication of the data. Of course, specific inquiries relating to this incident should be directed to HWL Ebsworth. I am aware that the firm is working with clients and the OAIC to meet relevant obligations under the Privacy Act 1988 and ensure that affected individuals are notified as soon as possible.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. How many Australian businesses and individuals have been impacted by this data breach, and have they been informed that their data has been compromised?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, again, Senator Patterson, I don't think you can seriously expect that we're going to be putting into the public domain the sort of information that you're seeking there as to the number of businesses that are affected. These are obviously very sensitive matters.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Patterson.
On a point of order, Madam President, the government was able to share these sorts of numbers in relation to Optus and Medibank attacks.
That's not a point of order,
If it's
Senator
not able
Patterson.
to do so,
Senator Patterson, that's not a point of order. It's a debating point. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thanks, President. Senator Patterson, I'd be interested to go back and see who actually provided what information in relation to those data breaches, because I certainly recall that in a number of instances it was the companies themselves who decided to put that kind of information in the public domain. The other part of your question was whether affected individuals or organisations have been notified. And in my previous answer, I made the point that HWL Ebsworth has begun notifying impacted clients regarding their information identified as compromised as part of this breach. But this process does remain ongoing. It will take time to complete due to the scale of the impacted data, but the government takes this seriously and is continuing to work with HWL Ebsworth.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. On the 27th of February, the Minister for Home Affairs said that she expected to have the newly announced Cyber Security Coordinator in place, and I quote, within the next month, end quote. That was almost 4 months ago. When will the new Cyber Security Coordinator be appointed and announced?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
I'm happy to take your direction, President. I don't know whether that question actually does relate to the primary. Obviously, it still involves cyber security, but being the generous person that I am, I'm willing to answer the question from Senator Patterson.
Order.
The Prime Minister announced the establishment of a coordinator for cyber security and the National Office for Cyber Security on the 27th of February this year. This role will ensure a centrally coordinated approach to deliver government cyber security responsibilities and lead across the Australian Public Service the coordination and triaging of action in response to a major cyber incident. I know it's the Minister's intention to announce the new coordinator in the coming weeks. We have taken the time, or the Minister has taken the time, to make sure that we get the very best possible appointment to that role. And I might point out that, of course, this is the first time that we've had an Australian Minister for Cyber Security in the Cabinet, so I think this government's record is strong.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Barbara Pocock.
The question is directed to Minister for Finance, Katy Gallagher. Yesterday, the Senate's consultant inquiry released a report supported across this chamber, and it found that PwC engaged in a shocking and calculated breach of trust and a deliberate cover-up. The New South Wales Government has suspended PwC from working on government tax. Queensland Treasury's banned contracts with PwC, as has the Reserve Bank. Meanwhile, your government continues to award contracts to PwC. One with the Health Department was published on AusTender just last week. When will you ban all contracts with PwC and cancel PwC's registration as a tax agent?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you, President. I thank Senator Pocock for the question and for the work that she's been doing, along with my colleague Senator Deb O'Neill, on inquiring into the breaches of confidentiality by PwC. And as I've said in estimates and in other places, we are deeply disappointed, angry at the actions of PwC in relation to this matter, and we have taken a number of steps to deal with it in the short term. PwC, the issue has been referred to the AFP. The Tax Practitioners Board investigation is continuing. There's recommendations from the 2019 review of the Tax Practitioners Board that weren't progressed. We are progressing those. We've also provided additional funding to the Tax Practitioners Board to give them the investment they need to do compliance investigations. In relation to procurement, and I would again repeat that The issue that has been brought to light by PwC's behaviour was a breach of a confidentiality agreement, but we have acted in the area of procurement. We've directed PwC to stand down from government contracts any personnel who were involved in or had knowledge of tax matters from government contracts. We've added new clauses into standard government procurement contracts to further strengthen the ability of the government to cancel these contracts in response to behaviour in the future. We've reminded all departmental secretaries that ethical behaviour must be taken into account as part of the value for money exercise under the procurement framework, and we've started work on a supplier code of conduct that will outline behavioural standards expected from suppliers during procurement processes, and we'll consider further actions as required.
Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Minister, AFP Commissioner Kershaw is mates with former New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller, now a partner at PwC. Last night we learned these mates have recently worked together to generate a new $750,000 contract between PwC and the AFP without a tender. What actions have you taken to give Australians confidence that the AFP's investigation into PwC will not be influenced by close relationships?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, in relation to the report, there has been a report to the AFP on the 24th of May relating to allegations of criminal conduct, and I think it's critical that the AFP is able to undertake its investigation into these allegations without any further comment on that specifically. In relation to the issue raised by Senator Pocock, the assertions that are seeking to call into question the integrity of the AFP, an agency that is committed to protecting Australians from serious threats, are extremely disappointing. AFP officers spend each and every day working to protect Australians and Australians' interests. They're not an easy job. The work is often dangerous, and many AFP officers, just like police all around the country, put their lives at risk every day to ensure that we can go about our lives safely. The Australian public should have every confidence that, just like all serious criminal investigations, this investigation into PwC will be undertaken by experienced investigators within the AFP Special Investigations team.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Minister, my concerns are well-based. Half the Internal Audit Committee of the AFP are former PwC partners with more than 20 years standing as partners. Every year, PwC donates to the Labor Party, and last year over $120,000 in direct donations alone. Voters are calling me and asking, is this cash for contracts? I had one this morning. At the very least, this is a problem of perception. When will you ban donations from any consultancy engaging in government work?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I mean, political donations are governed by specific donations law and are a matter for the party organisation. They're not a matter for the government. But I would say, and I have said this in estimates when it was raised by a number of Green senators, if there is a specific allegation of anything inappropriate that doesn't adhere to electoral donation laws or procurement processes in government, then make it. But don't just stand and smear. We have taken appropriate action against this breach of trust and this outrageous behaviour from PwC. We have taken action from the Treasury. We have taken action from procurement. The matter has been referred to the police. That is what the government should have done. We have done all of those things, and if there's anything further that we need to do in response, and we will read the committee, then we will consider it.
And before I call Senator Bilyk, I'd just remind senators that the latter part of that question was precisely what I referred to in my statement. Senator Bilyk.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Senator Farrell. I keep hearing from constituents and stakeholders about the urgent need for more affordable housing in Australia to address the unmet need from Australians struggling to put a roof over their head. The Labor government has a clear and ambitious housing reform agenda to deliver housing for Australians who need them. I'm particularly interested in a specific component of that, the Housing Australia Future Fund, which I understand will improve housing outcomes and affordability. Could you please outline what this fund will do and what, if anything, is preventing this becoming a reality today?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Bilyk for her ongoing interest in the issue of housing and homelessness, particularly in her home state of Tasmania. And I can answer her question because the Albanese government wants every Australian to have the security of a roof over their head. Fundamental to our plan is increasing the supply of new housing, which is exactly what the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund will do. The fund would deliver 30,000 social and affordable rental homes in its first 5 years, including a minimum of 1,200 in your home state of Tasmania, Senator. It will deliver, yes, Senator Dunningham. It will deliver housing for people escaping family violence, for veterans and for First Nations Australians. Sadly, this week, the Liberals and Nationals and their newest member of their coalition, the Greens political party, teamed up to reject the Housing Future Fund bill. The actions of the Greens stopped Housing Australia from starting to enter into commitments for new homes from the 1st of July this year. They did this because the Greens love to campaign about more housing, but when it comes to it, the Greens do everything they can to block more affordable housing for vulnerable Australians. Just 2 days after the Greens rejected the fund in the Senate, Yarra City Greens councillors voted against social housing in their area. While explaining their opposition to the new social housing on the council-owned land, one Green councillor said the land was better used for other things than social housing. Other things than social housing. Another Greens councillor complained that social housing wasn't inclusive. Sadly, the Greens talk the talk on affordable housing, but when it comes to actually supporting specific projects, they vote it down. We will not be deterred by the Greens' political games.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you. I, like all on this side, was hugely disappointed that the Housing Australia Future Fund will be delayed. I know these delays will have impacts on the delivery of this important component of the government's housing reform agenda and will have an effect on Australians who are in urgent need of safe and affordable homes. Can the minister explain to the Senate what the impact of these delays will be?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Bilyk for her first supplementary question. And we've seen the Greens claiming that there is no cost to the rejection of the Housing Australian Future Fund. The reality is, President, that that's not true. The cost of the Greens' delay has been made very clear by many. Those opposite, the strange new coalition of the Greens, Liberals and National parties, should be ashamed of themselves. The actions of the Greens mean less access for affordable housing for those who most need it in this country. And the Greens know that every day that passes the 1st of July, the fund is delayed. Another $1.3 million won't be going into social and affordable housing in Australia. The Greens want to play their political games, but we want to get on doing what the Australian people elected us to do, delivering housing. The Greens are about protest, and we're about homes for people. Because of this—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Order across the chamber. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Thank you for that answer, Minister. But it wasn't just those on this side that were frustrated at the delays. I'm aware that stakeholders have been calling for the parliament to pass the government's housing agenda and that stakeholders have expressed frustration at the delays which are being faced by people in need of housing. Can the minister provide an update to the Senate on how the opposition to the Albanese government's housing agenda has been received by these stakeholders?
Minister Farrell.
Thanks, President, and once again thanks Senator Bilyk for her second supplementary question. And yes, I can provide that answer because across the country we're hearing from representatives of those fighting for more affordable housing who are appalled by the Greens, Liberals and Nationals deal. The New South Wales minister said the work that we were doing, the work that everyone who is interested in actually delivering housing under these processes was now going to be paused. The head of the Housing Minister in New South Wales, Senator Watt, the head of Blue CHP, a social, affordable and disability housing provider, said that they had spent the last 18 months preparing 3,000 properties to start construction as soon as the bill passed, which now may not happen. People are confused about the new Greens-Liberal coalition deal, and can I request, President, that during the break you consider shifting the Greens over to the other
Minister
side,
Farrell.
where their real coalition friends are.
Expired. Order. Senator Ciccone, that is out of order. Senator Tyrrell. Order. Order, senators. Senators Watt and Farrell. Orders. I had Senator Tyrrell on her feet waiting to ask her question. There needs to be silence in the chamber. Senator Tyrrell, please continue.
Thank you, President. Appreciate it. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Gallagher. 2 years ago, the House Standing Committee for Health, Aged Care and Sport completed its New Frontier report, which made 31 important recommendations to help make it easier for Australians to access new medical technologies like medicines, devices and diagnostics. The inquiry spoke with just about everyone in this space: patients, clinical, health groups and industry. There were more than 200 submissions and a dozen public hearings around the country. All that work on a really important issue, and yet the government hasn't spoken a single sentence in response. Nobody here wants people to miss out on the life-saving and life-improving tech they need, but that's what is happening now. It's what the report is about. So when can I tell Tasmanians will be responding to it?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. I'm going to have to take that on notice. I'm not aware of that report, and I think you said it was a couple of years ago it reported, so under the previous government it is custom and practice to report within 6 months of committee reports being tabled. So I would imagine that should have happened under the former government, but I will take further advice on it. I would and come back to you. I'm sorry, I don't have the detail in front of me.
Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The job of the Medical Services Advisory Committee, MSAC, is to recommend whether to fund medical tech, which means they become affordable to the average Australian. But there's delays with the committee approving things, which can be up to 8 years from first submission. Then there's delays in the government's approval process after MSAC recommendation, which can take a further 2 years. Can the minister advise specifically what is being done to address this bottleneck?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I'll come back to the senator with a comprehensive answer on that, though we do have those bodies in place specifically to use expert knowledge and advice to government around approvals process, not just for medical technology, but it covers there are other processes for pharmaceuticals as well and other treatments. So there are good reasons to have in place processes that advise government, and then obviously government has to make decisions, particularly if there are fiscal implications for that. But we are absolutely determined to build and invest in a world-class health system here. We have that. It has to be stronger. It's under enormous pressure. And we know that improvements in medical technology, devices, treatments are being accelerated at pace, and systems have to respond to that. But I will come back with a comprehensive answer from the Minister for Health.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thank you. So the Health Technology Assessment Review is looking at how we can make the assessment and approval of new medical technologies quicker and simpler. But the review excludes many important devices like pacemakers or some cancer treatment technologies. They're still facing delays, and they're no less important. Can the minister tell us how many improvements can be applied to all technologies, not just those subject to the review?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. I think it's best that I take that on notice and come back with an answer to the whole thing. I'm sorry I couldn't assist you more, Senator Tyrrell.
Senator Kosovic, your first question.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Last month's budget predicted inflation would be 3% by next year's budget. Does the government stand by that forecast? And does it agree with the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, Michelle Bullock, that unemployment needs to increase to 4.5% in order to tame inflation?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I thank the senator for her first question. Yes, the government stands by the forecasts outlined in the budget. Obviously, if there's change to those, they get updated in the normal way, as has been done in every budget under every government since they were put together. They are forecasts to set out the expectations of the Treasury and their advice to government about what is happening across the economy. And I would say in that budget we did forecast an uptick in unemployment as a result of higher interest rates, some of the global uncertainty and the fact that we expect our economy to slow over the next 12 to 18 months. They were all forecast in the budget, and what we're seeing playing out across the economy is in line with those budget forecasts.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Kovacic. My apologies with your name. Senator Ruston is assisting me.
No problem.
First supplement.
Thank you. Does the minister agree with the most recent CPI data released by the ABS that reveals that due to inflation the price of milk rose 16.1% and the price of fruit rose 10.6% between March 2022 and March 2023? As Australian Fund Manager K2 said this week, Australia's inflation pulse is not receding as quickly as its peers. What responsibility does the Albanese Labor government accept for these pressures?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank the senator for the question. And in relation to the impacts on inflation and the contributors to inflation, there are a range of inputs, obviously, that are influencing the inflation number, and inflation is staying higher for longer than we would like. The Treasurer has been saying that consistently, and the reason that our budget was so focused on putting downward pressure on inflation, whilst easing cost of living, whilst repairing the budget, whilst finding $40 billion worth of savings, whilst returning 82% of upward revisions to revenue to the budget, was precisely calibrated to deal with the inflation challenge. We do believe that inflation has peaked and that is coming back, and that it will head towards the target range over the next 18 months or so, and that is in line with budget forecasts. But yes, we would like it to come down faster, and that's why the government decisions have been so calibrated.
Has expired. Senator Kovacic, second supplementary.
Does the minister agree with the same CPI index data showing Australians paid 26.2% more for gas and other household fuels, 14.9% more for utilities and 6.3% more for medical, dental and hospital services in March this year than in March 2022? Doesn't the Albanese government's inflation crisis now represent Labor's latest tax on households across our country?
Minister Gallagher.
Well, the answer to that question is no, and I would say that the quarter with the largest growth in inflation was in the March quarter of last year, so actually before the government change. That was the single largest quarter's growth in inflation, and that is when monetary policy started tightening and interest rates started lifting. There are a range of contributors to the CPI number. It does include gas and other household fuels, and I would say that if we hadn't taken decisive action in December last year, that could have hit households even harder. We know that. The AEMO and other expert advisors have told us that prices, had we not acted, would have been higher and would have hit households harder, and you opposed it. You, as the opposition, opposed the steps that we took, which have eased that pressure on households, and that's why in this budget we have $1.5 billion going to support households with energy bill relief.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babet. Order on my left. Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. Now my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. Minister, documents released under FOI show that the Australian government secretly asked Big Tech to censor and deplatform the former member for Hughes, Craig Kelly, for criticism of government policy, and the former member for Dawson, George Christensen, for promoting a peaceful phone-in protest. Now, Twitter declined to deplatform Mr Kelly, as Twitter deemed his posts not to be misinformation. However, Craig Kelly's entire Facebook account was removed for his posting or sharing of scientific papers, data and expert opinion that contradicted government policy. Minister, what legislative or regulatory power does any government department have to request for censoring of lawful, free political speech on social media platforms by a parliamentarian, specifically a parliamentarian?
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thank you to the senator for the question. And the first point I'd make in relation to the questions about Mr Christensen and Mr Kelly, whilst they were parliamentarians, then obviously those actions of government to which the senator is referring were actions of the previous government. So that's the first point I'd make. And so I can assist you as much as I can, but this might be something you might want to have a chat to those on the other side about. But more broadly, I understand these matters were discussed in Senate estimates in response to questions, particularly from Senator Roberts. I'm also advised that the approach that the government took then, as discussed by departments, or as the evidence by departments demonstrate, is that it was to refer posts to social media companies for those companies to assess if those posts met the platform's policies. So the senator asked about legal provisions. The advice I have is this is a referral process from government that was engaged in and I assume is still engaged in, but ultimately the legal capacity to take down a post or whatever information is action taken by the digital platform itself, and is ultimately a matter for that platform. If there's anything further I can assist with, I will do so, but I just would again reiterate I appreciate you have a different view, Senator, but the evidence before estimates was that the government and the Health Department were concerned with disinformation and misinformation, and those that form the basis of referrals.
Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Now, Minister, which government department decides what exactly is misinformation and what is the truth, especially when history, including the recent COVID period, teaches us that today's mistruth is actually tomorrow's truth? Who determines the truth? Who determines it? And do they have the power under our Constitution to censor, which is what they're trying to do, censor free political speech? Do they have that power, Minister?
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Wong.
Well, I actually, I am of the view, and I suspect many people in this chamber are, that there is the weight of scientific evidence peer-reviewed by people who are appropriately qualified. And I will look to. I know, Senator Canavan, these are not your views, but the view I have is that the government, your government was the one that did this. So can I just be really clear before I take that interjection?
Senator Canavan.
At least he's consistent, I suppose. But
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Canavan, I called you to order twice, and you continued. Senator Canavan, interjections are disorderly. Order. Order. Senator Canavan. Minister Wong, please continue.
Peer-reviewed advice from medical and scientific—
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. I appreciate that—
Senator Babet, why are you on your feet?
I'm on my feet for a point of order.
Thank you.
Now, I appreciate that the minister is attempting to answer the question, or rather dance around the question.
What is your point of order,
My point of
Senator
order
Babet?
is my question was, under the Constitution, can the government, or which government department, can censor free speech? Who can censor us? We are, of course, the Parliament.
Senator Babet, that was part of your question, and the minister is being relevant to your question. Minister Wong.
Well, Senator Babet, there are a few concepts which are sort of in that question. One, of course, parliamentary privilege is an important part of the Westminster system. One. Secondly, there is a distinction. There is a distinction between false information or misinformation and free speech. And you and I may disagree, or you and the Morrison government may disagree about where that line is.
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Babet, second supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. Now, Minister, from this day forward, will your government, your new government, give a guarantee that none of your departments or agencies will ever again request big tech to censor or remove or anything else a lawful post by a member of parliament or a member of the public or anyone else ever again? Can you give that guarantee to the Australian people whom you represent? If you can, great. If you can't, tell us you can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Wong.
As I said in the first, in response to the primary, the advice I have is these are the legal framework for this is with the platforms themselves. I would make the point, Senator Babet, that I do think the rise of different platforms requires a mature conversation amongst people who may have different political views about how we manage the debates and conversations on those platforms. And I do have a view. That democracy does require and is stronger for at least agreement around certain facts. And we are better as a democracy if we can debate on the basis of facts that we all understand what the appropriate policy response is. And I think it is a risky thing for us where we allow an equivalence between things which are demonstrably true and things which are just demonstrably not.
Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Given the Albanese Labor government's recent May budget was another significant step in laying the foundation for a stronger economy into the future after a wasted decade, can the minister please provide an update to the Senate on how the measures outlined in the budget are supporting the Albanese Labor government's economic plan? How is our plan and the recent budget helping to deliver record employment growth, lift incomes, build a more prosperous and resilient economy, and cleaning up the mess left behind by those opposite?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question and for her excellent chairing of the Senate Economics Committee. The Albanese Labor government's recent May budget was indeed a significant step in laying the foundation for a stronger economy into the future. It was a budget that targeted cost of living relief. It targeted Medicare and the care economy. It looked at inclusion and equality. It focused on growth in energy, technology, small business and, of course and importantly, under my portfolio as the Minister for Finance, responsible budget management and, more broadly, responsible economic management. It's a budget that was about jobs, about growth and about fairness. We've seen record employment growth, with wages growing faster and more people getting wage rises since we came to office. Our plan in the recent budget, we've helped to deliver record employment growth, lifting incomes and building a more prosperous and resilient economy. We've seen wages grow by 3.7% over the year to March quarter, the fastest growth in over a decade. Unsurprising, considering it was a deliberate design feature of the former government's economic architecture to keep wages low. We've also seen 60% of jobs record a higher wage rise than the year before, the highest proportion on record and around double the pre-pandemic average. This is not by accident but by design, because our policy isn't to keep wages low like those opposite, and it's a testament to our commitment to not only create jobs but also ensure that these jobs are well-paying and secure. And you can see the single biggest investment in the budget was in our aged care workforce to ensure that they receive the wage increases that they deserve for the work that they do caring for elderly Australians. We also had our $14.6 billion cost of living package with support around energy bills, reducing out-of-pocket health costs, income support payments and the single biggest increase of the Commonwealth rent assistance.
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that comprehensive response. It's clear that the Albanese Labor government's economic plan and the recent budget are delivering significant benefits for all Australians. Can the minister further elaborate on how the government is supporting businesses and industries to grow and innovate, particularly in sectors like energy and technology, and how these initiatives are contributing to job creation and to economic growth?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for that supplementary. Well, as I said in my earlier answer, growth was a key. Our growth agenda was a key part of the May budget, and those opportunities are there. Of course, in the energy transition, securing cleaner and cheaper energy, but a cleaner energy future and the jobs that will drive that transition, in technology and, of course, in our support for small business. Our economic plan includes a range of measures designed to foster innovation, boost productivity and create well-paid, secure jobs. We are investing billions in the National Reconstruction Fund, targeting industries of the future such as hydrogen to drive economic growth and create new jobs. Furthermore, we're investing in the skills and capacities of our people with policies like fee-free TAFE and vocational training to ensure that our workforce is equipped with the skills needed for the jobs of the future. These investments, amongst others, are part of our commitment to supporting business and industries.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you again, Minister, for another comprehensive response. The measures you've outlined are indeed making a significant difference in the lives of Australians. Can the minister further elaborate on the government's actions to alleviate cost of living pressures for Australians? And could you also shed light on alternative approaches to these crucial measures and the impact those approaches are having on Australian households?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the supplementary. We are acutely aware of those cost of living pressures facing many Australians, which is why finding ways to ease cost of living pressures without adding to inflation was one of the key priority areas of focus in the May budget. In addition to those areas I've already mentioned, the government has acted decisively in the area of housing, bringing together states and territories through National Cabinet to look at what we can do to make sure that we are making a difference where we can, where the Commonwealth has responsibilities, to ease a real area of pressure for many Australians, and that is around housing supply and making sure we're working with states and territories to get as much affordable housing supply and affordable rental housing supply in place as soon as possible. And I would say, as we come to the end of this sitting fortnight, again urge those who are standing in the way of the Housing Australia Future Fund to get behind it and support it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham.
Sir President, my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. I refer the Minister to section 4.1 of the Prime Minister's Code of Conduct, which states that ministers must, and I quote, take all reasonable steps to ensure that they do not mislead the public or the parliament. Minister, given you have clearly misled the Senate regarding your knowledge of sexual assault allegations prior to them being made public, are you not in breach of section 4.1 of your own government's ministerial code of conduct?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And the answer to that is no. And I refer Senator Birmingham to the statement that I made to this chamber on the first sitting day of this fortnight when I addressed this question comprehensively, and I can read it out for colleagues across the Senate again. At Senate estimates on June the 4th, the then Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds, said, "I know where this started." She went on to say, "I was told by one of your senators 2 weeks before about what you were intending to do with the story in my office 2 weeks before. I was shocked at the assertion made by Senator Reynolds with the clear implication that I was responsible or had an involvement with making the story public. That was not true, it was never true, and I responded to that allegation by saying no one had any knowledge. I explained that to Senator Reynolds in a wide-ranging private meeting that night where several matters were discussed. I informed Senator Reynolds that I had been given a heads-up about the allegations in the days before they became public, an explanation she accepted at the time some 2 years ago. In fact, Senator Reynolds even said on the record in Senate estimates that night, and I quote, "I would like to say, in relation to the matters raised before the dinner break, Senators Wong, Gallagher and I had a respectful discussion during the dinner break. They've assured me they were not involved in that matter becoming public, and I accept their assurance." I repeat, she said, "They've assured me they were not involved in that matter becoming public. I accept their assurance." This proves that Senator Reynolds knew the context of our exchange that evening was around whether or not I was involved in that matter becoming public. I was not. Senator Reynolds and Senator Ruston, who also attended that meeting, have known that for 2 years and have never once raised a concern about that with me.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, what you conveniently omitted from that extract of your statement was the fact that you had been provided with information and knowledge prior to it becoming public. Section 5.1 of the same Ministerial Code of Conduct requires ministers to provide an honest and comprehensive account of their exercise of public office in response to any reasonable and bona fide inquiry by a member of parliament. Minister, why have you consistently refused to live up to that standard by denying the reality that you did mislead the Senate?
Order on my right. Minister Gallagher.
It's misheard Senator Birmingham there, but I did say as part of my statement I informed Senator Reynolds that I had been given a heads-up about the allegations in the days before they became public, an explanation she accepted at that time, some 2 years ago.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
President, I seek leave to move a motion relating to the censure of the Minister for Finance as circulated in the chamber.
Leave is not granted, Senator Birmingham.
Pursuant to contingent notice of motion standing in my name, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended as would prevent me from moving a motion to provide for the consideration of a matter, namely a motion to give precedence to a motion of censure of the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. President, the facts are clear. Senator Gallagher has misled this Senate.
Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Order on my right. Senator Birmingham, please continue.
The facts are clear. Senator Gallagher has misled this Senate. And despite being given ample opportunity over the last 2 weeks to acknowledge that reality and to do the right thing by appropriately apologising and appropriately correcting the record, Senator Gallagher has instead obfuscated, avoided and outright refused to acknowledge the reality. The facts are very clear. At Senate estimates on the 4th of June 2021, Senator Gallagher stated that no one had any knowledge of an alleged sexual assault in Parliament House before those allegations became public on 15 February 2021. That was a statement made in a tone full of indignation. How dare you, Senator Gallagher said at the time she made that statement. Yet, then, last week, on the 13th of June, Senator Gallagher confirmed that, and I quote, "I was provided with information in the days before the allegations were first reported." Not, as Senator Gallagher just said then, a heads-up, but information. So, having said that no one had any knowledge, she then acknowledged, indeed, she had been provided with information. This is an open and shut case of misleading this Senate and this parliament. Now, this debate right now and many of the questions over the last 2 weeks could have been avoided had Senator Gallagher simply acknowledged this blatant act of misleading the Senate.
Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Order in the chamber, particularly on my right. Senator Birmingham, please continue.
It could have been avoided had Senator Gallagher taken responsibility for misleading the Senate by appropriately apologising and correcting the record. Now, those opposite continue to deny
Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes, I have just called the chamber to order. That includes you. Senator Urquhart, order across the chamber. Order. Order across the— Senator Hughes, you are being disorderly and disrespectful. Senator Birmingham, please continue.
Don't take my word for the fact that the misleading is there and is clear for all to see. Take the analysis that has been repeated time and time again across the press gallery. Last night, David Crowe was crowned as the latest press gallery journalist of the year. What has he written? Quote, "Katie Gallagher misled Parliament." Further quote, "Gallagher's own words show how she misled a Senate committee in June 2021. Philip Curry from the Financial Review, quote, "Finance Minister Katie Gallagher was exposed as misleading Parliament." Or indeed some of the longest-serving journalists who have covered politics in this country. Paul Kelly,
Order.
quote, "It is
Order.
obvious Gallagher misled the parliament." Or
Order.
how about Michelle Grattan then? How about Michelle Grattan? Gallagher's claim was wrong and therefore misled parliament. Journalist after journalist, observer after observer have all come
Order.
to the same conclusion based on the same facts. And that conclusion is that Senator Gallagher misled this parliament. As indeed said, and why does this matter? Well, as Senator Gallagher herself indeed said to the Senate, amongst the many hundreds of questions that she sought to ask over this matter, she said to Senator Reynolds, "You have a responsibility to the Senate." Well, indeed, Senator Gallagher, you too have a responsibility to the Senate. And what is that responsibility,
Senator
President?
Birmingham,
That responsibility,
Senator Birmingham,
President.
I remind you to make order. I am not going to constantly interrupt senators on their feet to, one, call the chamber to order. Senator Birmingham, I also remind you to make your remarks to the chair.
And what is that responsibility to the Senate? It is, as the Prime Minister's Code of Conduct for his ministers says at section 4.1, to take all reasonable steps to ensure that they do not mislead the public or the parliament. Now, Senator Gallagher says that she has always acted ethically. But an ethical approach, President, would be firstly to not mislead. An ethical approach, secondly, would be to own up if you have misled, to apologise if you have misled, and to appropriately correct the record if you have misled. Senator Gallagher has failed on each and every one of those tests. These are serious issues, President. These are serious issues. And there are associated issues that go to questions of how the tragedy of an alleged sexual assault was politicised. But before us today are not those matters. It is the simple issue of misleading the Senate. And no matter the views of senators on other matters, this Senate should not stand for being misled. It should send a message clearly by censuring Senator Gallagher.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, for the last 2 weeks, we have seen the opposition trying to blame everybody else, everyone else, for their own shortcomings, rather than take responsibility for their actions or their failure to act. Senator Birmingham conveniently wants us to not remember what this is about. We remember what this is about. So do people around this country. This is about I don't know that an alleged rape is a private matter, Senator. You may think that. A Liberal staffer made an allegation that she was raped in a Liberal minister's office, metres from a Liberal Prime Minister's office, and instead of dealing with these issues appropriately, instead of taking a long, hard look at themselves, they just try to point the finger at others. And what is worse,
Senator Wong, once again, the comments across the chamber are disorderly and disrespectful. I am asking you to either listen in silence or leave the chamber. Minister Wong, please continue.
Those opposites seek to punish Ms Higgins. They seek to punish her supporters, and they seek to punish anyone in this place who sought to ask reasonable questions of them.
Order. Senator Colbeck, I have just called the chamber to order. Senator Urquhart.
Withdraw that imputation on Senator Wong.
Senator Hughes, I did not hear the Senator Urquhart, I'm dealing with it. Senator Hughes, I did not hear what was said, but in the interests of this debate particularly and the good order of the chamber, I would ask you to withdraw.
In order to not politicise, I withdraw.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Minister Wong.
President, we need to remember what this is about. It's about the well-being of a young woman who bravely stood up and spoke out, whose employer, the Morrison Liberal government,
Minister Wong,
let her down.
Your seat. Order. Order. The disorder on my left is disrespectful. Senator Wong is entitled to be heard in silence. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. A young woman who bravely stood and told her story, whose employer let her down in the days, weeks and months that followed the allegation she reported to them. Well, after 2 years, when the government and party she served did nothing, Ms Higgins made the courageous decision to stand up and speak out. Those allegations were made public on Ms Higgins' own terms. Now, she knew when she came forward that she would become a political target, and we have seen that this fortnight. But she did it anyway because she was determined to change the culture in this building to make it a better place for other women, and she has. Her courage and her selflessness helped start a national reckoning. It helped lead to the Jenkins report. It helped this government to set the standard and implement the Respect at Work. And who was spearheading these reforms? No one opposite. No one opposite. They let the Respect at Work report gather dust on Mr Porter's desk. They dragged their feet and failed to act on key recommendations. It was Senator Gallagher who has led these reforms with her usual integrity and conviction. And these reforms have made a difference. But you know what? It will take all of us to ensure they actually have an effect. It will take reflection. It will take reflection and it will take responsibility for change. But regrettably, what has been demonstrably clear this last fortnight is what has not changed is the attitude of too many of those opposite. We've seen that in their behaviour this fortnight. Too many of them have learnt nothing from the national reckoning of 2 years ago. And the very same members of the opposition who were at the centre of events years ago, the very same members of the opposition who have dodged questions, carefully chosen their language and evaded scrutiny and have never been transparent about their knowledge and action and are pointing the finger at others. A desperate attempt to launder their reputation, a desperate attempt to rewrite history by peddling false accusations about others. People opposite willing to use the private text messages of an alleged victim, survivor of sexual assault, in this chamber for their own political purposes. I've seen a lot of things. But that was a new low. All of that they would rather do, rather than take responsibility for their own shortcomings, to reflect on what they might have done differently. Instead, they've sought to punish Ms Higgins and her supporters. Or support to punish people who sought to ask reasonable questions of them about their knowledge and their action. Well, the events of last week, where they concern Ms Higgins or others, including another senator, show once again—
Minister Wong. Order on my left. I should not have to constantly call for order. You are being disrespectful. Minister Wong, please continue.
The events of this fortnight show, if anything, there are questions to answer on the other side. But more importantly, the message that has been sent by the behaviour of those opposite to women around this country about how they will be treated should they make an allegation of sexual assault. Those opposite should consider their actions and the responsibilities that they bear. And with that, I move that the motion be now put.
So the question is that the motion be put. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Yeah, I have it. Lock the doors. So the question is that the question be put. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Urquhart as teller for the ayes and Senator Scarr as teller for the noes. Order. There being 36 ayes and 29 noes, the matter is resolved in the affirmative. I'm now putting the suspension motion itself. So the question is that the suspension motion is moved by Senator Birmingham be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? No. The noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. Lock the doors. So the question is that the suspension motion is moved by Senator Birmingham be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Scarr as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 30 ayes and 36 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. Senator Wong.
I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I note you're seeking the call, Senator Hanson. I'll just wait for the chamber to clear a bit.